And now presenting the one film nominated for Best Picture you've all actually heard of. Hey everyone, it's me, Aaron.
And I'm Michelle.
And this is our continuation of our look at all the films that are nominated for Best Picture. And we've now finally come to Hidden Figures, which I think is the fan favorite film to win. I don't know what odds it has. I'm hoping for it.
Yeah.
But I think that this was the one that audiences everywhere, they loved it. So this is the one that everybody is cheering on. And I gotta say, I really liked it too. But you loved it. Like, when we came out of the theater, you were like a kid who just saw like a superhero film, like, and then this part, and then this, and this. And I was like, it was awesome seeing like you so excited about this film.
That's kind of what this is. These women were real life superheroes.
They were, yeah. Bam. Oh, you just summed it up right there. Let's get into what this movie is about, but let's be real. Does anybody out there not know what this movie is about? Seriously, I feel like I'm just wasting time explaining this, but in case you don't know what this movie is about, this is the true story of three black women who were working for NASA in the early 1960s, right at the start of the space race. And it is basically about how they were the most qualified people working there, or at least some of the most qualified people working there. However, they couldn't get in the positions that they needed to be in because of just how stupid America was at that time. It was because of both. Here's the thing, it was a double whammy.
Yeah.
It wasn't just racism, it was racism and sexism working against them. And this is one of those films that, like, this whole movie, they're like, how did Russia beat us into space? How did they get someone into space before us? This is insane that we have now watched. Like, Sputnik is up there, they're spying on us at the moment. I can't believe that all of this is happening. We're America, darn it, we're supposed to be first at this. Oh, by the way, you, black lady, who is more qualified for this than any of us, you don't get to see all the information. How are they beating us? It's like, yeah, it was like, God damn it, America, could you just not be stupid? Like, it's one of those things that makes you realize, if we could all just get past all the bullshit, if we could just get past, like, all the prejudices out there, we could all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, we'd be living on Mars right now. Like, we would have conquered space if the entire world could just come together. And I think that's good because this is one of those films that it's important for kids to watch. And I have one small problem with the film. It's not really a problem, it's more just like a little nitpick, which is that, like, they show you the discrimination that they go through. Like, they show you that the main woman who we're following, Catherine, like, there's three women, but there has to be, like, one protagonist who's the main central focus, and it's this woman, Catherine, who is, they refer to her as a computer. Back before computers were computers, computer referred to just people who did math. And
a lot of calculating.
Lots of calculating. And she is in the big room with everybody else, and she has to check everybody else's numbers. However, whenever she has to use the bathroom, there's no colored people's bathroom in that building.
In the main building.
In the main building, there isn't one for half a mile, which means that she keeps disappearing for like 40 minutes a day whenever she has to use the bathroom. And like, they won't let her use the same coffee pod as them, and all this, and like, you see like all the stuff that she goes through, so you see discrimination against her. However, at no point does it really show you how bad it actually was. And like I said, I kind of have a problem with that because, like, I feel like what really happened probably would have been a far more interesting story. Like, for example, Kevin Costner, he plays like the head of her department. And there's a moment in which he asks her, where do you go for 40 minutes a day? And like, she explains, I have to run through the rain and fact check this stuff while I'm on the toilet because there is no place in here that I can use it. And then there's a scene in which he is just taking like a big metal pole and bashing down the coloreds only bathroom sign. He goes, there, at NASA, we all use whatever bathroom we need to use the one that's closest to your desk. Everybody get back to work. And like, that's a good moment, but like, I was reading about this and they said that, oh yeah, in the real story, he was just as bad as everybody else. Like, that didn't actually happen.
Yeah, like, the real person might have been like a jerk and everything, but like, Kevin Costner's character in the movie was actually really great.
His character is good, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't care what gender or race you are, as we need to get this guy in space. We have to beat Russia. We have to beat...
He's kind of the voice of the audience, because it's like, how are you all being so stupid that you're letting, like, your own prejudices stop you from progressing in all society? Like, he's supposed to be that voice. So like I said, my one, like, small problem is that it's like, I know what went on in the real world had to have been so much worse for them, and it makes me really want to know more about the real story, but at the same time, I can't really call that a complaint, because this is basically the Disney version of what happened, but that's a compliment because it means a lot of kids are going to go and see this. Kids need to see this movie, because this movie, it presents the civil rights movement and presents racism and presents like what was going on at that time in a way that won't be too traumatic for children, so they'll be able to go, oh, I see, so this kind of stuff was going on back then. And then when they get older, they'll be able to go, oh, it was so much worse than I thought. But also, it's going to, like, any, like, little girl who sees this, they're going to be like, I can do that. Like, they're going to be like, I can, you know, make an impact, I can be important to history, and I can do it with math, I can do it with science. This really did take this story and it presented it in a way that makes it great for families, and it makes it great, especially, like I said, for kids. And you need more stuff out there that gets kids into science.
Right.
Like, I love the beginning of this film when you see Catherine as a little girl, and, like, she's going into school up to the big chalkboard and, like, just writes this massive equation out there. And she's doing it, like, they say she was 11, but she looked like 7 or 8. Like, she looked even younger than that. But she's going into, like, it looked almost like college-age people. Like, it was just a room full of, like, grown adults in there, and she writes out this massive equation, and everybody in there is... Like, even the teacher was shocked.
And another thing I liked about this film is, like, usually a lot of films nominated for, like, best movie with black people in it, like, it often depicts them, like, as servant roles, you know, certain
yeah, like the help.
Yeah, exactly, and all that. But it's like, in this movie, they're not serving anyone. They're actually, like, doing real jobs.
Well, it's not saying that, like, you know, being, like...
No, but it's like...
But, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Basically, like, they have a very specific job that requires a lot of skill.
A lot of education,
A lot of education, a lot of skill, a lot of hard work.
And a very important role.
Yes.
Like, yeah, like, it's... You're making a very good point. That it's like, yeah, typically whenever... Like, that's one of the recurring, like, jokes about the Oscars. Is that if a black person gets nominated, they're typically playing a slave or they're playing a servant. I really can't think of, like, the last time that it was, like, that you had a film nominated for Best Picture, and you had people getting nominated for Best Actor, and there were people of color who weren't like, you know, oh, and this is the struggle of poor people, this is the struggle of, like, slaves. It's like, no, scientists, engineers, like, intelligent people. So, yeah, you're right. I hadn't even really thought about that aspect of it, but this is very important that, yeah, it's time that we're finally actually getting movies that depict the struggles of history, but at the same time don't just show these people in the exact same role over and over and over again.
And I also think this is, like, really good because it's like genius can come from anywhere, basically.
Which, yeah, as we said, this is a great thing for kids.
Yeah.
Because no matter who you are seeing in that audience, you will see this and you will be able to go, if I work hard enough, then I can do that. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I didn't really have that much of a problem with the way that with how it depicted, like, the civil rights movement being a little bit softer, with, like, racism was not nearly as bad in this film as it was in reality. Like, I just got done reading John Lewis's trilogy, March, which depicts the Selma March and the sit-ins and pretty much everything that John Lewis and Martin Luther King organized. And, like, I kind of had that in the back of my head all throughout this, and that book is brutal. Like, he does not, like, shy away from, oh yeah, this is where I got beat in the head, and this is how many stitches I got, and I was in the hospital overnight, and I was afraid that someone was going to come in and murder me in my sleep, and I was like, holy cow. It never once gets anywhere close to that near.
Like, the closest it went is, like, when like, Mary came home and, like, her family was, like, watching TV, and there was, like, a news about, like,
It was about like a bus or like a truck that got pulled over, and the people inside just got pulled out and like beaten.
Yeah, and it's like, and like she comes home, she turns to her house, she's like, the kids don't need to see this, and he looks at her, it's like, the kids do need to see this, and it's like, yeah, that's the sad truth. It's like, this is kind of what they have to.
What they were dealing with.
Yeah, this is what they had to deal with at the time. This the cold hard truth that they have to accept.
But also like just speaking about that as far as like the story goes, like I said, that was them kind of like stopping in that moment to kind of goes like, yeah, it was really that bad out there. Like that was the one moment. And like I said, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the reality behind this. But at the same time, I understand why they didn't, because this is supposed to be an uplifting film.
Right.
This is supposed to be a film that shows people rising up and reaching this position in which they actually did like gain respect there, and they actually did get like promoted to the positions that they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And
it is a very uplifting film,
it is.
Especially at the end where they like show like where they went from there. Like,
yeah, that it ends the same way that all biopics end, in which it shows like this person went on to do this person went on to do this. And here's the thing, I never once like got choked up watching this film. Like I never once like started to cry, I never once started to get like, oh my goodness, until it got to that moment. And I think it's because this film, kind of like with Hacksaw Ridge, which I just got done talking about earlier today, it's a film about real life people, but it makes you realize, oh my gosh, these real life people had to do this. Like there's so many biopics out there in which you're like, they probably exaggerated this, that probably didn't happen. This one is one of those films in which you're like, it was probably even worse than what we saw in here.
It's like the opposite, basically.
Yeah, it is. So when it got to that point in which they were like, Catherine got presented with the Medal of Freedom, and she eventually had a building named after her at NASA, I was like, that's when like I felt like the tears started to come out. I was like, oh my gosh, it took her that long, it took decades, but finally this person who had a very major role in getting us into space and saved people's lives with her calculations, finally she got the respect that she deserved. Like, that was just... It's so weird that, like, the true life story is what got me choked up, but the thing is, I can't really say that about most biopics. I should say that about most biopics. I should be thinking that with most biopics, and this is one of the first times that I ever actually did that. So, yeah, this movie nailed what it should have done. Mm-hmm. And as we mentioned, like, this is a movie showing, like, them kind of, like, progressing through the system, slowly getting up to the position that they should be at. I think they did an excellent job at showing every single little thing that they had to do. Because, like, Catherine, when she's there in... I don't know the name of the room, but it's, like, the big room where they're doing all the calculations. At first, she gets handed these sheets, and they have so many lines blacked out, and goes, yeah, you don't have classification for that. You don't have, not classification, God, what's it called when you have, like, a certain level? You were in the armed forces. What's it called? You don't have... Clearance?
Yes.
Clearance. You don't have clearance for that. Dear God, I'm stupid. You don't have... You were just looking at me as like, what word are you forgetting? And then when you said clearance, you just had that look of like, you cannot possibly have forgotten the word clearance. Yeah, you don't have clearance to see this. And so she just has to take whatever little number she gets and fill in the blank spots from there, just basically doing the math. And then once she is able to prove that, that like other people's calculations were wrong without even having all the information, then they're like, all right, you know what? Start giving her some more of the classified stuff. All right, let's do that. And then it goes from there. And then all of a sudden, it gets to the point in which it shows that because they are basically creating new math here, like they are doing calculations for stuff that has never even existed, the data is changing constantly. Like it's changing by the minute. So there's so many times in which she has to present information and then they're like, throw that right in the trash because none of that matters anymore. We're on to brand new stuff at this point. And she goes, I can't give you the correct information if I'm not there in the meetings where this information is taking place. And they're just like, God damn it is stupid if we're keeping you out of this. All right, fine. But don't say anything in there. And she goes in there, and then nobody knows the answer to the question except her. And then when she speaks up, everybody looks at her like, did she just talk? But they're so impressed by what she just said. They're like, well, okay then. All right. And then she just takes a piece of chalk and starts writing out the entire formula up there. And like you could feel the entire room just going, oh my God, she's a genius. Like you could feel the entire room just like melting their prejudiced hearts there at that moment. And like I said, I'm sure in reality it didn't actually happen. But this film, like I said, this film is supposed to be uplifting. This film is supposed to be great for kids. And it basically, like, I could feel like in that moment, any kid watching this, or even like adults watching this, was like, oh yeah, if I work hard enough, I can prove myself. I'm like, yeah, that is what this should be. So like, it was a great watching that progression. And there's a guy in here who is basically supposed to be like the Weasley prejudice guy, Jim Parsons, who's on Big Bang Theory. He's supposed to be the guy who's like has the biggest problem with it. And he's just a weasel. But what I love is that he's got like a weasel behind him at all times. Like there's so many moments in there, like when she figures out the classified information, he goes, how did you figure that out? That was classified information. And then there was a guy saying behind him, was like, yeah, classified information. I was just like, who the fudge are you? Why are you in this room? Like that dude didn't even have a name. He was just there to be like the shadow to Jim Parsons. Like, yeah, you heard the boss. I loved how cartoonish that guy was. But it's the same with all three of these ones. Like we focus on Catherine the majority of the time. But, or the other character, Dorothy was the one played by Octavia Spencer.
Yeah, she was basically, she had the responsibility of being a supervisor, but she didn't have the title or the pay of it. So she's basically constantly getting screwed over.
Yeah, and they get this brand new computer in there.
You know, like, this is when, like...
computers were just being a thing.
Yeah, computers, like, actually the machines were starting to, like, come in and replace the computer people, actually.
This was all just a prequel to the Terminator films. Which, a great thing about this is that it makes you realize how on earth did we get these guys to space? Because when they get the computers in, it just shows them there at the door going, how did we not measure the door? And like they're having to break down the wall to get the computer in. I was like, these idiots didn't measure, oh my, how did we get to space? How did this happen?
It's like, geez, no wonder the Russians are beating us.
Jesus. Oh my God, John Glenn went up there in like a duct tape wallet basically on the top of a giant missile. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it really does make you realize like this whole operation is being held together by super glue. That's what all this is. But yeah, so when they get the new computers in, like she sneaks in there and starts studying how to make the computers work. And when it comes time for it was like, you're not supposed to be in there. You're not. Wait, is this actually working? Hold on a second. None of us can make this happen. And she like sneaking out. After she sneaks in there, she then sneaks back to like her group of like 30 different women that she works with and goes, these things are going to replace us. Someone has to know how to work them, and she's training all of them in secret to make them work. So when eventually at the end it's like, we gotta get somebody to run this machine. You're the only person who knows how to run it, but we're gonna need a team of like 30 people. It's like, well now, I think I know people. It's like, God, this was so brilliant of you.
It's like, I'll do it, but I need my girls with me.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great, like, just teamwork thing, which I kind of wish I had seen, like, more interactions between her and them. Like,
yeah.
I don't think anybody in her group actually ever talked. Like, I think it was just her talking to them. I was like, I would like a little bit more of, like, personality from some of them. Like, not enough to make them, like, you know, one of the major characters in this movie, but like enough that it's like a back and forth and it's like, oh, she said that thing. It's kind of like the thing she said before. I know this person now. You know, something kind of like that. And the other one
was Mary, who was played by...
I don't know how to pronounce her name. Janelle Monáe? Janelle Monáe? I'm sorry. I don't know how to pronounce the name. I'm very sorry. This has been the year of me not knowing how to pronounce names in these Oscar films. I apologize to everyone. But yeah, Mary Jackson was her name, and she was the sassy one. And she was great. Octavia Spencer is the person who got nominated from here for Best Supporting Actress. And don't get me wrong, Octavia Spencer is good, but Octavia Spencer is just doing the same thing that she's done in multiple other films. Like, Octavia Spencer has kind of, like, created that role for herself in films of being the person who, like, knows more than other people, but she still has to fight to get to where she wants to be. And she's going to take care of everyone around her, and she's the knowledgeable one. Like, that's kind of like the role that she has made for herself, and she's very good at. And she's very good in this film. But Mary Jackson was the one who I was like, that's who I want getting nominated.
Yeah, and she's basically, well, she's the engineer basically, but it's like, you know, because she was a black woman in the 1960s, she didn't really do engineering. She just like did calculations, but she wanted to.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think you were here for this scene.
I was, I went.
Yeah, you were out getting snacks. So like, basically, there was like they were doing a test run on the shuttle to see how.
That's them doing it outside right now, by the way.
So yeah, to see how well it can hold up against the atmosphere and everything. And like after the test is done, she goes into the room and she's like, we can slow down the friction if we use smooth rivets and blah, blah, blah. And she's just going on and on. And then there's another guy there who actually is the engineer. And he's like, you are so brilliant. Why aren't you an engineer? She straight up told us like, it's because I'm a black woman. And he's like, I am a Polish Jew who survived the Holocaust, and yet here I am achieving my dream. You can do it too. And that's just like, I think that's very inspiring.
It was kind of like a message of like people of like all generations, people who've been discriminated against in all groups are capable of rising up.
Right.
And eventually reaching their goals.
Yeah.
But again, that's the thing. This entire film is about these three different women trying to reach their goals. And what I love is that every single one of them has a goal. It's not like Catherine. Catherine's the main one, but it's not like she was the only one who had a goal.
Right.
All three of them had a point they were trying to reach, and we watched each of them go through that. And I think they did an amazing job of balancing that.
Yeah, it's like when Mary wanted to be an engineer, it's like she had like all the qualifications, she had the diplomas and everything, then suddenly Kirsten Dunst's character comes in and is like, oh, by the way, you also have to get a degree in this school, which is an all-white school. It's like, and then she says, every time I think we win the race, they move the finish line further away. And it's like, that is such a good quote, and
it's a good summation of how people in power constantly rig the system to allow themselves to remain in power.
But even she was able to find a way through that.
She goes and gives an amazing like little monologue in court. She has to appeal in court to allow her to actually go to this all white and all men school.
Yes.
Like I said, this is both about racism and sexism. And she has to give this speech in court and she actually makes the speech about the guy they just launched into space, and I was like, God, it is so great how like things are just lining up for this.
It's like she knew all the right things to say.
She did, which that was her character. Her character was smooth about everything. But it was that monologue that she gave that made me go, I really hope you had gotten nominated. I really wish you had been the one that got nominated, because that speech was great. But again, it shows every single one of them had to fight for what they want. And I mean, it's just them chipping away at a mountain throughout this entire film. But eventually they're able to reach it, which is what makes this such an uplifting film. In fact, I won't even lie, like we saw this kind of late last night, and I started like closing my eyes at point just to kind of rest a bit, but it's mostly because...
You were just tired.
It's mostly because I was tired, but it's also because this was just a feel-good movie. Like this was not one of those films where like constantly all throughout, I was there like on the edge of my seat like, what's going to happen now? I was kind of like, I can just chill here, like, yeah, all right, you ladies save all of science. There you go. Just this feels good.
Like really, the only really intense part was like at the very end where like John Glenn actually went into space.
Which I just gotta say, I really want to know. Like I said, I want to know the real story behind this, because I know it was so much worse than what we saw. I want to know, what was John Glenn actually like? Because John Glenn was like the one guy who's like, I don't care about any of this racism stuff. I'm going to be
yeah, he had the witty comments, the charming smile.
He was the guy who was
so friendly with everybody.
He was the guy when like everybody was being racist against these three women. He was like, I want her to save me in space. I was like, did this actually happen? Because like, don't get me wrong, I respect the hell out of John Glenn. But I don't know if he was actually like that back then. I want to hear like some first accounts from people being like, oh yeah, John Glenn, nicest guy you've ever met. He single-handedly broke down the walls of all prejudice here at NASA. It's like, I don't know if that actually happened. Because he was just like, so like, there's a moment in which the astronauts are first arriving and you see like the entire group of people out there, and it's just all the white people in one big group, and then all the black people are far off to the side, way over there. They're there to watch them arrive, but they're not allowed to say anything, not allowed to shake any hands. And they're like, all right, Mr. Glenn, that's enough. It's time for us to come along. He's like, I haven't finished shaking everybody's hands yet. And he goes over there and is like, hey, how are you guys doing? And he's like, I really just want to know, did you actually do that? Like, because if you did, bravo to you, John Glenn. But I'm like, are you just trying to make John Glenn seem like even more of a hero? Because he's already went to space. He's already a hero for that. But it's like, I just want to know, what was John Glenn actually like? But yeah, as you're saying, the only real tense moment is at the end when John Glenn is going into space.
Yeah, because like that's the moment when I realized, oh, these women and their calculations are like responsible for the survival of this man.
Yeah. And they had to do calculations on the fly.
Yes,
because
like literally,
the computer was coming back with different stuff.
Yeah, like literally, as soon as like John Glenn was going up to the shuttle, they saw Catherine was like running, like doing all the calculations that she just got from the computer.
Yeah, like she had to like the computer came back with different information, and they're like, John, this might not actually be what we thought it was, and he was like, well, then get Catherine in here. Get her to fix this. I ain't going into space unless Catherine says so. And, like, they had to run all the way half a mile over, which it's kind of a great callback to how they had to run half a mile. She had to run half a mile to get to the bathroom because they had, like, the exact same Pharrell song on there, which, by the way, Pharrell did great music in this. But they had the exact same song as this guy has to run over there, grab Catherine. They have to run back as she's doing the math there. And, like, yeah, it actually is kind of, like, intense. And, like, you're seeing John Glenn go up there to the shuttle, and he's freaking out up there. He's like, oh, God. And, like, there's a moment where he goes, do you have the time to someone next to him? And he tells him the time, and John just has this look on his face like, mother. How did I get myself in? I'm about to die. Like, he just had that look on his face. So, yeah, that was, like, an actual pretty tense moment. I thought that was a great way for them to end this film. So, yeah, honestly, I don't really have anything else to add to this. Other than the fact that I love that, Ali, that's his last name. I can't remember his name. But he was in this as the guy who fell in love with Catherine. He was also in Moonlight. And when I was talking about Fences, I mentioned that the guy who played Bono in there was also in Manchester by the Sea. So it's like, other than there are two guys who are in two different Oscar-nominated films this year, I kind of want them to have like their own separate green room in which they're just allowed to chill there. Like they have the best catering there in that green room. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, how many Oscar-nominated films were you in this year? One. Come back when you're in another. So yeah, I just kind of love that. Like when he popped up, I was like, that's kind of dope. Like we're going to see La La Land in a moment. If he pops up in there, I'm going to be blown away. This will be the best year he's ever had. Because he was also in Luke Cage this year, which was awesome. But yeah, that's about all that I wanted to say about this. You got anything else?
I think another thing that's really good about this movie is that it'll like inspire people to like actually read up on these heroes and like find out like all the stuff that happened to them.
Yeah, because like I said, I am really interested in what the real life story was. Because I know it had been so much harder for them, so much worse than what we actually saw. And yeah, it does make me want to learn more. So that's the best thing about this film. Literally, this is what most biopics can't do. It made me, A, feel really passionate about the real life people, and it also made me want to learn more about the real life people. I can't really say that about most biopics. So, despite the fact that this was just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, this is just kind of a nice film. Like, my tension and my emotions never really got that high. I was just kind of chill throughout the whole thing. It still did what most biopics can't. So I think that totally deserves applause. But let us know in the comments down below what you guys thought of it, and we have one more of these Oscar-nominated films to do. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. I'm not going to be able to see Lion. Kind of bums me out, but yeah, come back later today for La La Land. Bye, everyone.
Bye.